Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about opening possibilities so that when you are hit with the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. If you're that person who has goals that challenge you to fully reach your potential, this show is for you. Thank you for joining me today. Negotiation. Is it about power or persuasion or something else? Today, we'll be talking about that and some of the secrets to building your negotiation skills. You know, when I ask someone where they want to go for lunch, and they say to me, "Oh, I don't care," I get disappointed. I know what I like and where I prefer to go, but usually I'm interested in allowing the person with me to feel their preferences have been taken into account. I don't care should mean that anything will be fine, but usually that's not the case. So I watch their reaction as I suggest a restaurant. And when their eyes brighten up, I know I found something that will work. In this case, I feel like I'm negotiating to give them some pleasure as well as have a great lunch. Then there are those situations where the stakes are quite different. You've made a presentation for a project you want for your team because you know it will help your unit make a strong contribution to the company. You feel as though you have everyone on board seeing the value. Then you present the budget. At this point, you know that everyone wants the benefits of the project, but there remains a gap in the resources between what you need and what they want to spend. How do you continue presenting your case so that the gap gets small enough that the project can go ahead? In this case, you are negotiating to get the optimal funding to move forward. In preparing for these two situations, are they different? Are there similar points in each? How could you prepare for the budget meeting so that your chances of success can increase? Are there skills that will help you prepare and help present the case, negotiating against the objections of the other party? We're going to be exploring these questions so that you can leave with ideas about how you can face your negotiating situations more effectively. We're going to take a quick break now, so stay tuned. Welcome back. You're listening to Unlocked. I'm your host, Madelyn Blair. Our guest today is someone passionate about helping people develop as effective negotiators. Welcome, Susan Borke, to Unlocked.
I'm very happy to be here, Madelyn. It's so great. Thank you very much.
Oh, you are so welcome. Well, let me tell the audience a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into our conversation. She has over 35 years of negotiating and negotiation training experience with domestic and international commercial companies, educational institutions, and nonprofits, and as a media executive at CBS and in-house counsel at the National Geographic Society. In addition to her private, corporate, and nonprofit clients, Susan is an adjunct professor at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies, teaching negotiation. She says, if you don't ask, you don't get. Susan, there's a great story behind this statement of yours. I wonder if you would share it with the audience.
Well, this came from when I was in college, and I really wanted to do a media-related internship. So I had an opportunity for a summer internship, and I was all geared to do it. And then I found out it would cost, I'd have to pay tuition. So here I am in the days of unpaid internships, making no money, spending money to support myself, although I was living at home, could live at home for this, which was, made it more manageable. And then having to pay so I could get credit for it, it seemed unfair to me. So I decided I needed to figure out how to cover this in a way that wouldn't cost me any more money than college was already costing. I happened to go to a university at that time that charged by the semester. So in any given semester, you could take 4 to 6 courses and it cost the same amount. in the fall or spring. So I found a professor who would sponsor me, for an independent study. And what I did was I spent the summer in the internship. I did my research for the independent study topic we'd agreed upon. And then in the fall, I registered for 6 courses, one of which was the independent study. And all I had to do was hand in the paper I'd basically written over the summer. So that enabled me. That was a negotiation where I found a professor who was willing to, give me this opportunity to achieve my interest of getting an unpaid, doing an unpaid internship in an area that was important to my career plans, and that individual's interest in sponsoring an independent study. So that was how that worked. And it's a question of, you got to ask.
You got to ask. I love that story. It was very inventive of you. And it was you say it's one of your first successful negotiations, and actually was part of what sparked your passion for doing this kind of work.
Absolutely.
It's great. Well, again, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome you to Unlocked. And I guess we've already begun with a story about you, so people can get to know that you're a real human being along with all this other. I wonder what is negotiation and where does it enter into our lives?
So I think the second question is possibly the more relevant one. And when you think about what are instances where you're negotiating, and I ask this question when I'm teaching, and people come up with, when I want a raise, when I'm trying to get a job, when I'm hiring somebody, often in work context. The fact is, it'll be in, when I'm trying to get my child to go to bed, when we're deciding on a family vacation spot. All of those are indeed negotiations. And generally, what can characterize a negotiation is a request. So if you're making a request of somebody, or somebody's making a request of you, that really is an opportunity to negotiate. Now, anyone who has either a small child or a teenager knows that in that case, every request is an opportunity to negotiate for them. In real life, and especially in our professional lives, we need to decide, we need to evaluate a request to determine if it is something that we want to exercise negotiation in, or we don't. So an example would be your manager comes to you and wants you to do a project. Now you're already got a full plate of work. So we tend, in the pressure that we feel under with time constraints and, at work, that we need to make a response of yes or no, right? It's a very binary reaction that we have. And generally, if your boss is coming or your manager is asking for something, you feel like have to say yes, right? In fact, before you react with a yes or a no, what I would suggest is you take a breath and think of a question. What information do you need in this situation? For example, an easy question is, when is this project due? Yeah. Right? Because once you find out, now the project may be due today, it may be due tomorrow, it may be due weeks from now. Depending on the answer, you may be like, well, if it's due today, I'm not going to be able to do, I have this, and this that are due today. It's just, I see no way of fitting it in. Mm-hmm. Unless, we talk about where those other things can move. If it's
what do you don't want me to do?
Right, exactly. Or what can we move to a later date? What do you not want me to do now? So if it's due in a couple months, then it may be something I can easily say yes to, because I actually know what my workload is like over the next couple months, and I can see where I'll fit it in. So some question, and as you pointed out, Madelyn, that question may lead to another question, like, what do you want me to do now? Not do now. So, and then you're in a negotiation. So and other times you may be able to just say yes, right? And then it's not a negotiation, because you can just say yes, or you can say no. And you may also know from other parts of the context that you're sort of allowed to say no. That in fact your manager would rather you say no than do a bad job or something else. Everybody acknowledges there are other higher priorities.
Yeah. I particularly appreciate when you say that the request is simply an opportunity for negotiation. It's a nice distinction in my mind to say, okay, if I say yes, then there isn't anything to question. So it's not a negotiation. Whereas if there really is some tension, then you can move into negotiation. Thank you for that clarity. I appreciate that. Okay, obviously there are all kinds of techniques and skills that you must teach as in your courses, etc. This is only an hour, so we don't. In fact, we don't even have the full hour. But what are some things we can talk about today to really help people really get the skills they need?
Well, I think I like to sort of divide the skills and the negotiation into two phases. So the first phase is preparation. And then the second phase is when you actually are engaging with your counterparty. And that may happen once, one and done. You go into the car dealership, you have a negotiation, you walk out with a car, or you don't, as the case may be. On the other hand, in our lives, even if you only have like the negotiation about whether you do the project that we just talked about, that may be one single conversation. On the other hand, your boss is going to come to you all the time, right? Your manager comes to you. There are all kinds of things that you're talking about and negotiating over. So this cycle of preparation and engagement is going to occur. And in a large negotiation, one that happens over time, think about a new business opportunity or a compensation negotiation, there's probably going to be several conversations. So you prepare, you have engaged, then you prepare some more, you engage again, that kind of thing. And the engaging is certainly always most productive when it's in person. And that, we know is no longer a default, or even it's like a gift when it happens. We do it over internet like this on a video call, or we'll do it through a telephone call or email. I strongly recommend against negotiating by text, because there's just so little information, both given and received. But sometimes there are certainly negotiations that happen over text, and Madelyn, your lunch example might be one of those.
Interesting.
So as we look at that, thinking about preparation and engagement, the skills that you exercise are going to be different. And one of the things that many people fail to do is any kind of preparation. They go into a negotiation and they just wing it. And, sometimes you can do fine. I will always emphasize the benefits, necessity, effectiveness of doing preparation before you negotiate.
What I hear in that is, let's take the example where you're going to present your project. You might want to present it to somebody who is a typical cynic or a real questionable person, and let them ask you lots of questions so that you can prepare answers. Is that the kind of preparation you're talking about?
That goes into it. I break up preparation into what I call research and rehearse. So where you are is in the rehearse stage. And as you notice, that's after research. So even before you've got that, you've put that proposal together, I really am going to ask you to think about what are you interested in gaining with this proposal? All right, what's underlying? You're like, well, it'll improve it'll improve the bottom line, fine, or it'll save us money. Spend money to save, but it'll save us money. Those are all fine things. It's what I want you to start thinking about is the whys. What underlies this? Why this proposal?
So
Well,
it might be something like, we've never been able to tackle the teenage marketplace, and this project will now open that to us. Is that what you mean?
right. That's part of it. And so then it becomes we have an interest, right? We as an organization have talked about reaching teenagers. We've put it in our goals. So now here's a way to actually execute on it. So we can execute on this interest of reaching teenagers. That's one aspect. Also, I have an interest. I want to be the hero. I want to be the person who reaches this goal. All right, that's perfectly legitimate. The people I'm presenting to, what are their interests?
Mm.
They're interested in saving, the company money or using the company's money, the organization's money wisely. They are interested in reaching teenagers, right? They're interested in making sure that leaders, that the organization cultivates leaders. What do I think their most important interest is going to be? Because if I think, I'm going to guess that their interest might be, effective use of resources. All right. And reaching teenagers is a goal, but that's secondary to making sure they're using the organization's resources most effectively. So I've got to think about what those priorities are. My priority is my first priority may be that I want to be perceived as a leader and an effective, contributor to the organization. And I see achieving one of the goals in the strategic plan as a way of doing that. So we're getting into things that are vaguer, right? A position is something like, we should do this project, right? Here's the budget. And the answer is going to be binary, yes or no. Mm. Right? When you have the what behind it, then that begins to be a more interesting conversation. So how are we going to reach our goals? What are the most important goals that we can reach? What are ones we can reach easily and cost effectively? Now we're beginning, because when you start asking those questions and positioning what you're doing in that context, it can be much more effective. So I'm not going in saying you should do this, right? I'm going in saying, I believe that we have a real interest in reaching teenagers. Madelyn, do you think that's the case?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Their suicide rate has been going up.
Right. So we've got a common interest. We both want to serve the needs of teenagers. Right. Now we can talk about how we might do that effectively. So that's the first, but this is what I'm doing even before I engage with you. I'm thinking about, what are your interests? What are my interests? How can I find, where do we have common interests? Where are our interests different? I want to spend money. You want to avoid spending money. So there's a place where the interests are different. So that's one thing we're going to do. As I think about that, I can begin to think about what are some ways to bring our interests together and achieve them. And that might be through proposals. So one proposal may be what I think is the best one, right? There may be other proposals that I know have been on the table, or things we've tried in the past, or, that kind of thing. I want to make sure I'm aware of those and think about them. So that I'm not just presenting the answer. Because again, the answer, people are going to, feel they need to shoot down, or at least shoot holes in, right? Make sure it's strong enough. Whereas if there are other possibilities, people can then begin to come to the conclusion that what I'm proposing that I can, put this forward as what makes it the most effective one.
Many years ago, I was with IBM as what was called at that time a large systems marketing rep. And it's fascinating, because that was the first thing you learned about the sales call. You had to be able to say something, or not say something, but ask and probe and find out if in fact this client really needed to have faster printing or whatever it was. And once you got that, then you could go into describing what would meet that need. So,
and that whole idea of really understanding what your counterparty needs, not what they say they need, right? Because they took the call. So like, it's really understanding what they need, because if they don't need more printing or whatever your division of IBM provides, you manage to uncover that they actually need small computer, personal computer support, whatever,
Mhm.
then you're able to say, something, this is the wrong part of IBM, right? You shouldn't be wasting your time with me.
Yeah.
Let me connect you to so-and-so who can
Yeah.
really address the need you're
Mhm.
describing,
Mhm.
right? So now you've demonstrated that you really listen to what somebody's saying, and you're looking to help them solve a problem.
Mm.
And to me, that's what negotiation is. Yes, it's also sales. I appreciate that. But really, in a negotiation, I think that's more effective when you look at it as a problem-solving process rather than a win-lose competition.
Yeah. Mm. I really like that change of language because that opens it up so widely now.
And what and I understand that you can get, many people approach negotiation as a competitive process, and you have to be aware of that. If you're dealing with a very competitive negotiator, you may adopt certain strategies to be more effective in that situation. I would recommend starting by modeling a problem-solving approach.
Mm.
I'm talking to you because I think you're the best person to work with to solve this problem. If that fails, if that's less effective, there are other things you can move. I would utilize in my approach. The other thing that's very important when somebody's a competitive negotiator is to really focus on understanding what their interests are.
Mm.
They may not know what they are.
Yeah.
So as you ask, open-ended questions, you can begin to understand more about what their interests are.
What are some of the misinterpretations or the misunderstandings about negotiation? I think you've touched on some of them just now.
Well, I think that a big misunderstanding is that it's a win-lose. Another big understanding is that, well, of course, you just split the difference. Right? And there's a negotiation expert out there, a guy by the name of Christopher Voss, who was an FBI negotiator, hostage negotiator. And in fact, his book is Never Split the Difference. And a great example he gives is, it's male gendered, so bear with me on this. But he talks about, you put on a suit and you're wearing the suit and you want to wear brown socks with the suit, and your significant other thinks you should be wearing blue socks with the suit. So of course the compromise is you wear one blue sock and one brown sock, right? And that of course doesn't work for anybody.
Yeah.
And in a hostage negotiation, right, you can't split the baby.
No.
I mean, somebody either comes out of it alive or they don't, and that's not really an acceptable solution. So you really have to figure out how to work with your counterparty to achieve the solution that meets everybody's interests, which in fact, especially as the hostage negotiator, you want the hostage to come out alive. And ideally, the hostage taker.
Mm. What that calls to mind is that what I've read is that emotional intelligence is important to negotiation. And when I read that, I wondered how one can eliminate their own emotions as they enter into really important situations.
So here's an interesting thing. When I ask people, what do you think, what's within your control? So think about there's the Covey, if you ever read 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, he talks about the circle of control, the circle of influence, and everything else. So Madelyn, what can you control?
My own emotions.
You can control your emotions. Okay. Can you, and you can control your thoughts, right?
Yes.
If you control your emotions, you can control your thoughts, right?
Right.
Okay. So don't think about pink elephants. Right. What do you have a herd of marching through your brain, right?
Pink elephants.
we really can't control our thoughts.
Mm.
And in fact, we can't control our emotions.
Mm.
We can control our behavior.
Mm.
So rather than looking to suppress or control your emotions in a negotiation, what I would recommend you really think about as part of your preparation is, what are your triggers? What are the things that really set you off?
Ooh.
All right. Where do you know, what is that stressor or stressors? And then what is your strategy for dealing with it behaviorally?
Oh,
So
so
somebody says like, I, I was in a negotiation with a litigator. Now I was doing a contract negotiation. This was not a litigation matter. It was for National Geographic Society. This was the producer's brother, right? We are trying to hire the producer. His brother's a litigator. Litigators are definitely, take no prisoners. And we had been talking, and I said something, and he was like, he basically called me a liar, which is a real trigger for me because I value the integrity I bring to a negotiation very highly. And so I was like, are you calling me a liar? And the way I said it, he knew he'd like stepped over the line, and he starts backpedaling. And I was like, I can't continue this conversation right now. We're done for today. We can talk later today. We can talk tomorrow. What time works for you? Let's schedule our next conversation. And we did. And I hung up. And the next day when we picked up, the tone was mitigated. I mean, I'm not going to say he was a pussycat or he was, totally cooperative, but he definitely stepped back, and we were able to move to an agreement.
That's interesting. You, instead of fighting with them, you essentially removed yourself. You said, right now, I can't do it. And I would never have thought of that as a successful negotiating skill, but of course it is, because it allowed your own self to let the emotions fade so that you could come back at a different place. And obviously the other person did as well.
And it doesn't reward someone, right, for getting me upset.
Yes.
So that, on the other hand, there are other strategies. Teachers, especially, have a great strategy when there's all this yelling and hubbub in the room. They talk more quietly, right? And then everybody has to quiet down to hear them. Mm-hmm. So if you've got someone who's yelling, right, you may need to lower the volume, because our tendency is to increase volume, right, to match the other two.
Yeah.
And so to think about that, there are different. It's not there's one strategy that works in every situation. You have to figure out what works for you, and you have to experiment. And the time to try a behavioral reaction strategy, right, what I'm going to do if somebody gets me upset, is not in a high stakes negotiation. The time to practice it is in a low stakes negotiation. Right? There's a great book that I cannot remember the name of the author, and I'm sorry about that, but there was a guy who really hated to hear no. I mean, it created intense anxiety for him. And he finally decided that the only way he was going to become more productive in his life was if he could tolerate getting no. And the way to begin to tolerate that would be to practice. So he made it his objective to get a no every day. So he might walk into his coffee shop and say, "Hey, how are you this morning? What a great day. It's Wednesday, free cookie day, right?" And did it in a way that, I mean, he fully expected for the barista to be like, "Yeah, that's funny. Ha ha ha. I wish I could." No, right. And most of the time that happened. Every once in a while he'd end up with a free cookie, and the one that was amazing was as he worked himself up, right, to bigger challenges, but still low stakes situations. One Saturday, he puts on his t-shirt, his shorts, his soccer cleats, and he went to a neighborhood that he didn't live in. And he went to people's houses, and with a soccer ball under his arm, and he'd knock on the door and he'd say, "Gee, would I be able to practice soccer in your backyard?" And do you know, there were a lot of people who said yes. I mean, that was, but his point was that there were people who said no, and getting those no's helped to desensitize him. So for him, that's what worked.
Wow. That takes a lot of self-knowledge, and that decision that you're really going to deal with this. And the fact that you use the word practice, because I know in my resilience work, I tell people you have to practice things, because it's not instantaneous that, oh, I know all about resilience and therefore I'm resilient. You really have to practice certain behaviors. And I also like the fact that you're talking about behaviors here. Speaking of which, well, maybe stepping beyond that a little bit, does trust play any part in negotiation?
Certainly. I mean, certainly trust plays a part. And the way you develop trust is through developing a relationship. So the relationship part of a negotiation, that how you engage with the other person, is really important. I think the more the person you're negotiating with believes and trusts that you're actually interested in what's important to them,
yeah,
then you start building trust, right? You start developing a relationship. Now, there may be other ways, there may be other components of developing that relationship. Really, it's part of your preparation, thinking about who you're negotiating with, right? Nowadays, I mean, you can find out so much. LinkedIn alone is a gold mine, right? So you may find out that the person went to the same university as you. Each of you worked for the same company, but at different times in the past. Those are things that can help create connection. You have to be careful, because you never know quite what somebody's relationship was, like what their experience at that university or that organization was. So you want to be, you can, I mean, there's everything that can say, oh, I noticed we both worked at IBM. You were there a bit before me, or I was there a bit before you. And we were certainly in very different divisions, but isn't it a small world? Right? And as you said with the lunch example, you may get some signals from how they respond to that as to whether they really enjoyed it, or it was a passing job and not something they remember either particularly positively or negatively, or it was in fact a negative experience. So that can depend. It still creates a connection, and those are connections you can begin to build on. So that can be helpful. In terms of building trust, the way you interact with somebody. So again, really asking what are they looking for? What does their perfect world look like?
Yeah.
Right. And it looks like more than I just pay you X. Right. Because you want to dig a little deeper than that position. You want to dig a little deeper and be like, well, yeah, I understand that's, you want to be responsible about how you spend your money. What do but what's your perfect, what am I doing? What does it look like when I'm here and I'm doing, and what are the results you're seeing, and and then the person's like, well, I don't have to, I can just give you a project and you run with it. I can, I know that you'll be there every, when you're on, when you're working remotely, I know that you'll be there available when I have a question, those kinds of things. So then you were like, okay, so it's really important to you that I'm available. Let's say this came out between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon, and can respond within, an hour or less to any, inquiry you might send me during that time. And then they can back and they're like, yes, that's what I meant. Or no, I don't need, I need you to be like, it's not like you have to be online the whole time or waiting for my question. I just want to, if I have a question, you'll at least acknowledge that you received it. So this is a whole, right. And it's not a quick conversation.
No, clearly.
That's something.
Trust rarely is a quick thing. Only when you lose trust, that can be instantaneous. Well, is it important to decide before you step into the negotiation, things that you absolutely must have and for a successful solution, or absolutely cannot have? I mean, can you get that clear? Should you get that clear?
Well, you should understand what your interests are, right? And there's a difference. I feel when you talk about what you absolutely must have, right? That becomes a yes or no. Okay. And I think that becomes a position. So if you go in saying, I have to make $80,000 a year, then yeah, you're going to really over constrain the situation. If you go in saying, I have to make here, I know what my budget is. I know how much my rent is. I know how much my, commuting costs are. I know how much my food and all that. I mean, I know what my budget is, and I really want to make enough so that I can meet my budget and save 10% and, pay off. And I need to have another X amount for my student loans, right? All of that. I know what my budget is. So now I'm going in saying, right now, that looks like $80,000. On the other hand, if somebody comes back and says, well, we give you, if you don't take vacation, of course, this happens never, but it used to. If you don't take vacation, you can take that as or let me put it this way. Let me use a different example. Somebody may say, we actually subsidize parking. It's free, or, $10 a month or whatever. We subsidize parking, so it's much less expensive. Or we subsidize public transportation so that, you're paying much less. So now your budget, your annual budget has been in effect reduced, right? That component's less expensive. Or they might say, we, match your contribution in 6 months to your retirement plan. Well, then you might be able to think, oh, okay, that means that I'm going to be putting so much more away in retirement. I don't have to save quite as much. Mm-hmm. Or if they say, we give you 4 weeks of paid vacation, even in your first year, you might be like, gosh, I do love me my vacation. I love that, and if I could take, 2 weeks at a time and then have 2 more weeks to do other things with, that has a value to me. So you have to understand what's important to you. And some of it is going to, be represented by money, but you don't want to be stuck on a figure.
Oh, that's great advice. And I love the examples that you gave of the 4 weeks vacation. Wow. All of a sudden you can say, if I have, what would that be? 20 days that I can spread across the year. I can have almost every other week be a 4-day week, which could mean a great deal to say, yeah, I like this. I can tell you as an employer, I'm thinking, wow, I should be thinking more creatively about the salaries that I offer and what is embedded in that salary or not.
Well, think of it not as salary. I think that's where, so again,
compensation,
right? The compensation package. And if you think about your what do you want as your compensation package? The other thing, and this goes back to something we were talking about as we prepared, when you're thinking about taking a job, right? You might be like, well, gee, it only pays this, and I'd really like to do this. So, what might be a way of saying, listen, what do you want achieved in this job? What are the key performance indicators? If I can reach, and we agree on them, and I reach them in 6 months, can I get an increase?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not 6 months later, I'm now trying to negotiate for an increase. We set it up from the beginning. It's in the employment letter.
Oh.
It's in the offer letter. If you achieve XXX, you'll get an increase.
That's an interesting strategy for young people coming out of college, where today's environment is so different. But there was certainly a period when they really couldn't find work. Now, if they can find work, it may not be what they want to do or the right salary or with little promotion possibility. But this way of setting it up before there's actually any emotion involved. Interesting.
It may not work. And that's fine. I mean, right, you have to understand, are you willing then to take the position? Or it may be that you can identify other things. So maybe this is a small organization. The likelihood of promotion is somewhat limited. What can you get out of it that would be of interest to you? maybe the opportunity to work on a lateral basis in different parts of the organization, or doing special projects for a different part of the organization.
Mhm.
On the flip side, if it's a really big organization where promotion is very locked, right?
Mhm.
About a
Yeah.
consulting firm or a law firm. I mean, it's kind of step. There's a program, and you don't really
Right.
move your way out of that. So is there an opportunity for upper management exposure?
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity to be on a committee or work on a project or do something that would give you a higher level of exposure, that down the road, when you're interested in being a partner, there will be more higher level people who say, oh yeah, I worked with Madelyn, on that committee. She
Mhm.
was really sharp.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting that you use the word exposure, because I remembered that was the one negotiating thing that I did use one time. I said, look, all I want is exposure. The salary was fine, the position was fine. I want exposure. Unfortunately, the person didn't know how to do that for me. but yes, exposure is a really important one, because you never know when you have those opportunities, what you can build on those. Now,
Exactly.
I want to shift our gears slightly, because I think some of us have encountered this. How does a person handle negotiating with someone who uses bullying to get their way?
Well, there are a variety of tactics, and different ones are going to work for different people in different situations. So part of it has to do with what you're comfortable with. Part of it has to do with, what this other person's comfortable with. One thing is, what can you find out ahead of time? So do you know other people who've negotiated with this individual and understand what the behaviors are that you're going to be exposed to? So somebody says, oh, they're a real bully. All right, what does that mean? They yell a lot.
Mm.
They try to intimidate you with loud voices. Is it that they threaten as part of the negotiation, which is different than just yelling? Is it that they gaslight? Kind of say things and then kind of take them back or put words in your mouth. What are the behaviors you're dealing with? Because when you understand, and maybe it's all of those, but when you understand, so if somebody's just telling you this person's a bully, dig a little deeper to find out what the behaviors are, because some of them may be more or less problematic for you. So for example, if somebody yells a lot, then you can decide how you respond to that. Or do you ignore it and just keep going, right?
Mhm.
So there are you have all different ways of choosing to respond, but you now know what you're likely to encounter. So you can rehearse, going back to your, what you had said at the very beginning. If somebody's a bully, are they the person you're dealing with all the time? Another thing somebody may tell you is, oh, they're really hard, they're difficult, they yell, they do all these things in a negotiation, but when you work for them, they're a real champion for you.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
when you're finally, doing the deal, like doing the actual work, they're really great to work with. I mean, unusual, but it could happen. So, part of that, if that's the case, you can say, I'd hate to think that this is the way we're going to be interacting, right? When we're working together.
Yeah.
Is this really how we want our relationship to be? I have, and the more you can, in that case, especially, the more you can listen and paraphrase and have the person really trust that you're hearing what they're saying and hearing what they want and trying to work with them to achieve their own interests, then, the less need they have to bully.
Mm.
Again, different people are going to respond to different strategies. So
Yeah.
I'm just tossing some different ideas out there. Finally, you need to know what you're going to do if there's no agreement.
Mm.
All right? Because it's not how little you're willing to accept or how much you're willing to pay or whatever it is. It's what are you going to do if
Mhm.
there's no agreement? So if that compensation package, just at the end of the day, you can't live on that.
Mhm.
All right? You just can't. What are you going to do that has nothing to do with this particular negotiation?
Mhm.
Do you have other jobs that they weren't your first choice, but do you have something else you can negotiate, and see if you can improve it? Are you going to stay on unemployment for another couple months? What are you going to do?
Yeah. Are you going to walk away?
Yeah. What are you going to walk to?
Yes, that's true.
And it doesn't, if it was more attractive, you'd already be there. You'd be negotiating to those people. It's not that what you're walking to is better. It's just you need to know what it is.
Yeah. One of the things that I do as I prepare for these shows is I ask some young people, usually in their teens, that if they were me, what question would I ask you? So this is the question they asked. What particular mindset do you have when approaching negotiation?
I think again, that's somewhat individual, right? I think there are elements that will contribute to being effective in negotiations. So really being interested, having a curiosity about your counterparty and what they need and where they're coming from to this negotiation, their perspective. So there's another good negotiation resource and negotiation, the American Negotiation Institute, Kwame Christian, he talks about compassionate curiosity. All right. So really being curious about your counterparty. Genuinely. It's not just sort of superficially. Another one is resilience, because you will get no, right? Coming into a negotiation, understanding that you're going to need to be resilient. And rather than seeing no as a rejection, seeing it as an opportunity to learn more about, about what elements are going to come together to help solve the problem, reach an agreement. A third thing is a faith in yourself, right? And a faith in your ability to be flexible and open, because you've practiced it and you're developing that. So along those lines, it's important to really think in terms of hypotheses rather than assumptions. Right? When you're thinking about your counterparty, what their interests are, treat it as a hypothesis, because the great thing about hypotheses is that there's no personal investment in them. Right? An assumption, a conclusion I reach, if I get wrong information, I'm going to ignore it, because why would I want anything that could make me wrong? Right? I'm not interested in that. It's a bias. It's a human bias. On the other hand, if it's a hypothesis, even if it's proven wrong, I've got more information. I've learned something. I'm ahead. It's a gain for me. So that becomes important. And in terms of perspective, I think there's a great story about how important really understanding someone's perspective is. There was a teacher who asked their students, what color is an apple? And some of the students said apples are red, and other students said they're green. Some said they're yellow. There was one student who said, it's white. Apples are white. And the teacher was like, and all the students are saying apples are white, right? Now, the reaction can be, you're wrong, right? Apples aren't white. They're red, they're yellow, they're green, but they're not white. What this teacher said was, what is a white apple? How is an apple white? Or when is an apple white, right? And the student said, well, whenever you cut into an apple, the apple is white, right? So here's a situation where two things are true. The apple is red and the apple is white, because it depends whether you're looking from the outside in or the inside out. And understanding that somebody can hold a perspective, an idea about something that's very different than yours. You need to be able to understand it. That doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But two things can be equally true, right? Even though they can't be both true at the same time.
Yeah.
And sometimes they are true at the same time. They're just very different.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to be aware of that And until you can communicate to your counterparty that you're seeing that they're like, oh, the apple is white, instead of just saying, no, apples are red, green, or yellow, right? Until you can be like, oh, you're looking at the inside of the apple.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm looking at the outside of the apple. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great metaphor. Thank you for that. Well, we're coming to almost the end of our time. I can hardly believe how fast it has gone. You've given so many strategies and so much for us to think about. I'm curious now. Let's take an example of a person who says, oh my goodness, I just watched this show and there are so many things I should be doing. How will they know that they really are ready?
I don't know if you're ever ready in the sense, in such a final sense. I would say that if you walk away from with nothing else, walk away with the importance of taking time to prepare.
Yeah.
All right. There are lots of ways to do that. I, give seminars and webinars and teach workshops on both preparation and engaging effectively. So there are books and other resources out there, podcasts, tons of stuff. But make sure you're spending the time to actually prepare for this whatever negotiation you're planning to engage in.
That is certainly sound advice, because I keep thinking of all the occasions in my own life, and when they have not gone well is when I haven't done my preparation.
Exactly.
Whether it was for negotiation or something else. And when I do it successfully, it's usually because I've spent an incredible amount of time preparing.
People say I don't have time to prepare.
Yeah.
All right. And here's the deal. If you invest, it's like an investment, invest the time in preparing, and then you will find the engagement part, the talking part is it's shorter, right? Because you've done a lot of work and you don't need to do it in the negotiation.
Yeah. Even if it's just to anticipate the question, because you got the answer immediately. You don't have to sit there going, how am I going to do this? Yeah.
And you're not spending, you can take your energy and expend it on really listening to what your counterparty's saying, rather than spending the time thinking about what you're going to say when they're talking.
Absolutely. And by the way, I loved your advice that one of the ways you can prepare is to make sure that you're resilient. Being my theme song as well. I think if we do take time to prepare, and I call it nurture your resilience, you're ready for a lot more of the unexpected. Excuse me, a lot more of the unexpected. And so it doesn't throw you. Yeah, fabulous. Well, we are just about out of time, but I do want to say are there any final words, Susan, that you would like to share with the group? And I'm going to ask you if you would stay online until the show is complete, so we can have a little a debrief.
Certainly. I think that it's understanding that negotiation is a learnable skill. Yes. Everybody can get better. So this isn't something that you're graced with. It's people, there's been a lot of research. There are a lot of resources. You can learn how to negotiate. That's one thing. Better, more effectively. You may be good, you can get better. The second thing is practice is essential, as well as preparation. And that practice, do really think about low stakes opportunities to practice. And pick one thing at a time. Don't try to do everything at once.
Yeah. Fabulous advice. Absolutely fabulous advice. I agree with every piece that you have just said. Well, again, Susan Borke, thank you so much for your time. Wow. I must say, I certainly enjoyed today. I told Susan before we started that I didn't know anything about negotiation. And as she talked, I thought, well, I have not called some of these things negotiation. I've just called them good management. But so I'm delighted that I already know some skills, not that necessarily that I use them well. Well, now, I think when we're faced with the unexpected, we need to choose the best option to help us move forward. And I think in this case, we also need to have ways in which we can negotiate with others as we strive for a mutual approach to move forward. In an organization where good negotiation skills are understood and practiced, finding the best option to move forward can be done with the feeling that everyone has been heard. I loved Susan's comment about making sure you understand the other person. You may not win exactly what you thought you were going to win, but to know that your arguments have been heard, I think makes an enormous difference. And to know that you have made the best defense of your idea gives a sense of accomplishment. Moving on from this kind of negotiation is easier when these exist. And that means that you're moving on faster and more resiliently. When resilience is a choice, you want to be ready to make that choice in the best possible situation. And I suspect you have learned some valuable tips today to do just that. I know that I have. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Unlocked. And if you have, make a comment in social media about what you learned and might do differently as a result. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. Better yet, subscribe to my channel so you'll always know what is coming up. You can learn more about the show on my website, www.madelynblair.com/unlockedtv, including all the replays of earlier shows. And check out my book, Unlocked, for practices that actually work. If you would like to explore what it means for yourself to build and nurture your resilience, send me an email, madelyn@madelynblair.com, and I'll get back to you. And if you would like to join the group mentoring program, Unlocking Together, or are just curious about it, write and tell me that. I'll send you more information about it and keep you informed when the program begins. Thank you for joining us on this segment of Unlocked. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilience.